Hey, everybody. Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriots. And one of the things I found that was kind of interesting was this article in Axios, Tampa. Axios is a political publication national, but they also have, I guess, different local versions of it, I suppose. So I got in my email this article from Axios, um, and Axios Tampa Bay, that one big thing, the billionaires backing DeSantis. Now, the reason why I called DeSantis, our governor here in Florida, a fake populist is because populism in various forms, whether negative populism or positive populism, like what's represented on this show by Herschel Miller, my co-host, and I, positive populism, all populisms are very suspicious of established political and economic elites. And Governor DeSantis, like former President Trump and Senator Ted Cruz and others, they like to claim they're populists. But in reality, they cloak their elitism, their support for economic royalism, the economic royalists, the plutocrats, and the globalists. They cloak their support for those forces with the rhetoric of populism and pro-working class. And Governor DeSantis, is no stranger. Now, I am a registered Republican. I know you're probably wondering what I am. I'm a registered Republican, so I could vote in certain primaries. But you're probably thinking, what the hell, Nevin? You're probably thinking you're a Republican and DeSantis is like totally the bomb for the Republicans. Now, I'm more of a Teddy Roosevelt Republican, if anything, and that pretty much is extinct for the most part. But DeSantis is very popular with the Republican base. The Republican base, by and large, they are Reaganites still. Unless you can tell me otherwise or share information with me. I mean, when I was kind of involved with the Palm Beach Republican Party and some of the Tea Party groups, they tended to be like Reagan, rah, 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 and all the Reaganite and libertarian and free market conservative globalist type of politicians. But anyway, so DeSantis. So this article, it's at least 42 billionaires and members of billionaire families worth a combined 275 billion have contributed to Governor Ron DeSantis's re-election campaign, a war chest he can raid to survive 2022 and beyond. The Sarasota Herald Tribune's Zach Anderson reports. The billionaire backers hail from 15 states, and 25 of them have given DeSantis six-figure contributions. Why it matters. That kind of support from the richest of the rich raises all sorts of questions about the influence of wealth on public policy. DeSantis has generally been a friend to the business sector, Anderson notes, with some of his billionaire backers benefiting from moves such as a tax break on racing tickets he approved last month. And it just goes on and how much he has. They found Floridians like Publix. Publix is a major supermarket chain in South Florida. Julie Jenkins Fincelli. And Tampa's Edward De Bartola Jr., the former owner of the San Francisco 49ers and founder of the Tampa-based real estate company De Bartola Holdings. They all gave money. There was out-of-state rich people like Julia Koch, based in Kansas. Vegas casino mogul Steve Wynn, of course. I think he was the owner of the Sands, if I remember correctly. And four members of the DeVos family, including former President Trump's education secretary, Betsy DeVos. And of the 42 billionaires and billionaire family members identified, only 17 gave to DeSantis when he first ran in 2018, Anderson reports. DeSantis raised $114 million through the end of April for his reelection bid, a staggering sum that puts him in elite company for political fundraiser. So, yeah, this is the situation here with DeSantis. DeSantis likes to claim he's a man of the people, he supports the working people, and couches his rhetoric from time to time like that. But it's clear that DeSantis is a more representative of the interests of wealthy plutocratic interests. Now, should the government just be against the wealthy people because they're wealthy? Obviously not. Again, the populist patriot. I say 1,001 times we don't hate the wealthy because they have more shit than the average person. Because there are wealthy people that earn their money through hard work, or yes, maybe they inherited money, but they built a business or they had an idea based on that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you are making your money through, let's just say, below board or very scandalous, or exploiting your workers, or scandalous means, like, for example, all the scandalous horrible working conditions associated with Amazon.com or Walmart, or, some of the major agricultural employers in this state that employ undocumented illegal immigrant or legal immigrant laborers who often are exploited more often than not, because employers can get away with them, exploiting them, because then they can call ICE and have them all deported back to their home country. Those kinds of employers, those types of capitalists, we have huge problems with them because they like to screw the American workers. Paul Singer, another wealthy person. Doesn't matter, he has more shit than that, but it's the way he made his money, by, for example, trashing the Kabbalah's office complex in Sydney, Nebraska, and just totally destroyed the town and totally destroyed the tax base. And Kabbalah's was a profitable company, nothing wrong with that, but they just wanted to make more money for their majority shareholders. That's bullshit. I call bullshit. And under a populist nationalist government, if I became president, Nevin Gusak, and I had the opportunity to ram through the agenda of the people, I would make that kind of business practices illegal. And I would enact the Second Bill of Rights, tweak it of FDR, put it in there, and I would forbid it. I would codify it in law, and that will never happen again. So that's my thing. Okay, Military Planet. Oh, I guess you're a new viewer contributor. Mr. Gusak, do you think the majority of U.S. politicians work for China, Iran, and Russian intelligence services? Well, that's an interesting thing. Oh gosh, I could have a whole show on that. I think there are some that are patriotic on the left and the right that don't, but I think some ideologically do. There are some elements within the Democratic Party that hew to the far left that are not to be trusted. Um, there are people like Judy Chu, for example, who has traveled to China, who is praised in the state owned Chinese press, has referred to herself as the daughter of China, of the People's Republic of China. And, you have certain California politicians that have these outreach missions to China. I think the way many of our politicians are corrupted by big corporations and by a free trade, free market ideology that allows them to be exploited by our enemies like China and Russia. It all started with Lenin and Mao, how the world bourgeoisie's greed is something to be exploited to make inroads into the targeted capitalist countries. And the Chinese and the Russians, even the Soviets before 1991, were very, very proficient at this. And lesser communist and anti American countries have done that: Iran, Cuba, Venezuela. So do I think they're corrupted? I think they're corrupted through the big business who profit from trade with China and Russia. And I think that's how they're corrupted. I think there are some politicians on both sides of the aisle that have been corrupted outright through their staffs or them directly. I talk about in my book, Turning the Page, where some of the politicians, some of the Democratic politicians, supposedly were recruited by the Sandinista intelligence service during the 1980s, and in some cases, the Cuban intelligence service. there have been politicians that have had ties with communist countries and even foreign communist embassies. You have people like Ronald Dellums, Bella Abzug, Vito Marcantonio was actually a Democratic politician from New York, and um, he actually was an out and out secret Communist Party member. Uh, so yeah, I think look, treason is a big problem in this country, and I not even de jure or legal treason, but treason of the heart, where people don't put our elites do not in general put America first. Some elites, with economic elites, some of the businessmen and women are good. Nick Hanauer, I think, in certain ways is good. You have anti-communist businessmen or very patriotic business people. I had the experience of working with the Coalition for a Prosperous America, which is a trade reform advocacy group. And I've met some of these business people like, Revere, the executive CEO of Revere Copper, and others, very patriotic, salt of the earth people. These are good people. Dan D'Amico, whether they're Republican or Democrat, these are good employers. They invest in their communities. They produce good products and services. So those kinds of business people in general are not corrupted, but the corporate elites, political elites, there are problems. And a lot of that it can be gotten rid of if we had radical campaign finance reform. So sorry about Military Planet for the long uh, answer. My book, Turning the Page, Volume 1, I talk about how our political process and our business people are corrupted in Volume 1. Hey, 21st Century Longest. I'm doing great. Doing great, 21st Century Longest. Question, 21st Century Longest, for you. You mentioned me going on New Frontier. I actually would be willing. I like the conversational level of the way CT, Culture Thug, talks and interviews his guests. I like it. And I actually was on an interview where one of the New Frontier people was sort of a moderator host, actually. So if you know somebody in New Frontier, I'd be happy to go on. There have been some YouTubers like Endernax who was on New Frontier, and I like Endernax a lot. So went on, and he's more akin to my views, which is Christian democracy or populism or whatnot. So yeah, 21st Century Longest. If you can get me in touch with them, I'd be happy to go on. I mean, I don't agree with all their views. I mean, I am anti-fascist and anti-communist, but I think it's important to have these dialogue of views and whatnot. What are my thoughts on politicians like Tulsi Gabbard? I mean, I don't agree with the Forever Wars, and her antipathy for neoconservative adventurers, I think, are good. I am a little leery about her views on the threat of Russia. She tends to downplay it, and that is kind of disconcerting. And she's kind of backed away somewhat from populist positions like the Medicare for All issue. And she's kind of in with the Jimmy Dore crowd, or was. And Jimmy Dore, he has some good views, populist views, but I think he's too much of an apologist for our geopolitical enemies. So that's where I kind of get a little concerned about that. So Tulsi Gabbard is not my favorite, and she wasn't my favorite in the Democratic primary. Uh, but I definitely appreciate her position as a veteran of our U.S. military. And she also, I like her positions on some of the forever wars. I think we need to scale that back down for a variety of reasons. So she's right on about that. And she also is into like physical fitness, surfing, paddleboarding, and I'm kind of into that too as well. In fact, I had fun paddleboarding all day yesterday with my girlfriend. It was like so awesome. I loved it. It's such an incredible day. So and oh, you're from Bulgaria. Yes, all the Bulgarian. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, the Bulgarian Communist Party. Um, the Bulgarian Communist Party, transformed into the Bulgarian Socialist Party, and that was still aligned with Moscow. So I'm not surprised, military planet. The Russians, the Soviets still left a net of agents in Eastern Europe to maintain a certain degree of influence, notably the Czech Republic, Hungary, Bulgaria, as well as even Poland. So yeah. But anyways, getting back to DeSantis, all great questions, guys. Thank you, 21st Century Longest. Really appreciate that. If you want to email me, send me an email to ng874@bellsouth.net, and we'll connect that way. I don't give phone numbers out. I have another email too as well, but send me an email, N as in Nancy, G as in Goose, 874@bellsouth.net, and we'll kind of coordinate. Anyhow, yeah, DeSantis, look, they're getting back to Ron DeSantis. Now, there are things I agree with DeSantis on. I mean, the fact that he put in an anti-communist educational program in our schools, look, we need to teach civics. We need to teach the threat of communism and fascism and everything else. Fine. Okay. And I agree with DeSantis with that. And I applaud his service. I think he was a lawyer in the military. I applaud that. Um, there are a few things I agree with him on. However, the most effective antidote to quote socialism and communism, even the rise of actual neo-fascism, and no, Trump is not a fascist, okay? If you know anything actually about fascism in the United States, actual fascist groups and United States and Europe historically and currently, as well as neo-Nazi groups, National Socialist groups, they don't have a lot in common with your Reagan Republicans and your fake populists like Trump and DeSantis and Ted Cruz. I'm sorry. They're neoliberal playthings for major globalist corporations. Neo-Nazis and fascists, they basically want a corporative state where labor and capital theoretically will cooperate for the good of the nation, and they do that under very tight regimentation. That's not the DeSantis limited government vision, okay? So the way DeSantis can really combat communism to make it less appealing, one of my close friends, he's no longer with me, a friend named Kenny, I'm not going to give a last name. He was a communist, left communism, then went back into communism because this country was falling apart. And he told me that communism was making gains, especially at the universities in Florida, the younger people. And the thing of it is why? Because people can't afford to have families. They can't afford to even rent a decent apartment because everything is so expensive and the wages have not caught up. And this is done by design. This is not like some natural force. And if I were DeSantis and I had my mass movement take power in Florida and sweep the institutions, I would abolish right to work laws, number one. Number two, I would make the unions extremely strong. However, I would push or encourage the unions, public and private, to put in anti-communist clauses, by the way. No communists in unions, by the way. They used to have those rules until it was dropped in the mid-1990s. I would also really look at ways to put in meaningful regulations and laws in place that limits the predatory segment of the capitalist class in the state of Florida too as well. I wouldn't just follow blind deregulation. I would say, look, things are getting way out of balance. I have no problem with landowners and investment companies making money. But when you have Goldman Sachs, as recently reported, buying whole swaths of homes, this was reported on Kyle Kalinski's YouTube program, and they're jacking up the prices of these homes. They're coming in, buying up cash and renting them at highly inflated prices. That's wrong. That is wrong. Really wrong. And as a state and as a country, I would put severe regulations limiting in that or banning that kind of behavior. Bring more of the mom and pop landlords back. Make it a truly competitive market. And I would use state government to pass that too as well. And to tell you the truth, if the reactionary Supreme Court in this country wants to oppose me, instead of bitching about Disney and wokeness and everything, that's standing up for the average person against Goldman Sachs and BlackRock and others that are killing the American dream in the housing market. That's a hill worth dying for. That'll unite people of disparate political ideologies, disparate races, and everything else. That's the type of hill I'd die on. But I definitely would get rid of right to work laws. I would definitely put in massive pay increases for teachers, cops, firefighters, continue to make Florida a truly veteran-friendly state for our veterans or our armed forces, definitely give them benefits. I know DeSantis has done some good things with the Hiring Heroes program. I think that's what it's called. I applaud DeSantis for that, but I would go much, 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 much further. Florida is a wonderful state. The weather, the different cultures, the food, the sports you have, all that stuff I enjoy. But when it comes to the way the state is government and the wage policy, the economic policy, it leaves much to be desired. Because the modern Republican Party is essentially the Bourbon Democrats of the late 1800s, early 1900s. And in my populist nationalist worldview, we want to crush the Bourbon Democrats. We want to crush the 20th and 21st century version of the Bourbon Democrats. They are reactionary. They are the worst element in American politics, along with the communists and other subversive extremists. We want to wipe those Bourbon Democrats out. That masquerade is Republicans. Not my kind of Republicans, I can tell you that. So politically, they need to be stomped out. Peacefully, of course. And the way to do that is through more information, more speech, hopefully getting to a point where we can run candidates from a populist civic nationalist perspective that rejects the corporate right and the totalitarian left. So that's my take on DeSantis, fake populist, puppet of the billionaires. What else is new? Beware of fake populists. Do your research, do your reading, look at actually what they do policy-wise, not necessarily what they say. Thank you all for listening. And yes, 21st century longest. Thank you for doing that for me. And that sounds awesome. Take care. Take care, all of you. Thanks so much, everyone, for commenting and listening. God bless. We got some more live streams coming up.